APIs were one of the key concepts I mentioned. The product is another one. Products are a way to package APIs together. Let's open the Products blade and let's choose to add a new product. Let's give it a name, say Travel Inspiration Endpoint, a description, and I'll also leave required subscription here checked. Let's add our Travel Inspiration APIs. So I'll add the App Service endpoints and the Function App endpoints. All right, so now why would we want to group this together? Well, there's a few reasons. Let me first click Create to create our product here. And then let me open the details by clicking it. That'll immediately make a few things clear. One reason is for organization and management. If you group these together, it's easier to expose multiple APIs as one thing to the outside world. You see blades for access control and properties here. These can thus be defined at product level as well, which makes management of this easier. We've got a good example here with our Travel Inspiration Endpoints product actually. It contains the App Service endpoints and the Function App endpoints, as you remember, but those are implementation details. It's not important for the outside world. For them, business-wise, this is one big thing, one product. It is quite common to have the same level of access control for them and policies for rate limiting, for example, that apply to all of them. If that's the case, the product grouping vastly simplifies managing all of that. All right, let's go back and let's open the subscriptions blade here. Here we can see the subscriptions to our API. Via a subscription, users can gain access to the product's APIs, but also important, the subscription can help in monitoring and controlling API usage. For example, you can allow tracing of requests at level of the subscription. I've got an example of that later on in this section. We've got a few subscriptions here that have been automatically created. Product Starter and Product Unlimited were automatically created by creating the APIM instance. Then we have a built-in all-access super subscription. So with this one, you can access everything inside of this APIM instance. And then we have a subscription that was automatically created because we created a product. This will only allow access to the things contained inside of our Travel Inspiration product. For the demo, let's show one of these keys and copy it to the clipboard. Let's note it down because we'll immediately need it. What we're going to do now is send a request to get the destination, so search for destinations. And that is now part of our Travel Inspiration product. Now, if you remember, we previously tested this. So we went to the Travel Inspiration App Service endpoints and we searched for the destinations via the test tab here. And by clicking send, that simply worked. As you remember, we got back a 200 OK with some destinations in the response body. But this only worked because we sent a request from inside of APIM on the portal. Let me copy the request URI here. So that is the external URI to this endpoint. And let's try sending this request from somewhere else. For example, from my local development environment. We've been sending requests via the HTTP file here. So let's continue with that. So let's send a GET request to the destinations endpoint as defined on APIM. I'm going to pass through application JSON as the media type we want to accept. And let me already send this. This time we get back a 401 access denied. That is because we didn't include a subscription key. The advised way to include this key is via an OCP APIM subscription key header. So let me pass that through and then let's paste the key we copied from the portal here and let's send this request again. And this time we get back a 200 OK. We regained access thanks to this subscription key. What's important to know here is that you don't need to define products to use subscription keys. You can also simply create a key via the subscriptions blade and use it to access a single API or all APIs in APIM, depending on how you configured it. But if you want to use one key to access a set of related APIs, grouping them together via product grouping is the way to go. Alright, let's go back to the settings of our product. That's the travel inspiration endpoints here. And let's open the subscription blade at level of that product. One way to add a subscription for this specific product is via this subscriptions blade. Simply clicking add subscription on top here will allow that. Another common way to get subscribers to your product, who will all get their own subscription key by default, is by publishing the product. Like that, it will become available via the developer portal and people can actually subscribe to it themselves. So let's do that. I've opened the settings blade. Let's click published and let's save this. This changes the product state to published. Whether you want to do this depends on your use case. If the product you're managing is for internal use by your team or even another team in your company, you can also simply create a subscription key for them so they can use it and provide them with an open API definition so they can learn how to use it. Publishing products is typically something you do when you want to expose your endpoints in a large company where you don't necessarily know all the other teams and you don't want to manage all of those subscriptions, or when you want to make your products available to the outside world and maybe even monetize them. Personally though, I've mostly worked in environments where we didn't publish the products. But without a published product, there wouldn't be much to see on the developer portal, and I promised you that I would show you that. The one thing we have to change for that is the level of access to our product. So let me open the access control blade, and here you can see that by default it is set to administrators. Like this, it will not show up on the developer portal. So let me add a group, developers and guests. Let's click select. And there we go. This should make this visible for everyone through the developer portal. So let's have a look at that in the next clip. The URI to the developer portal can be found on the APIM overview blade. You're looking at that right now. Let's click it. And we see that we haven't published this developer portal yet. The developer portal, as mentioned before, is an automatically generated website with documentation of the APIs, preferably exposed as products. From here, developers can then subscribe to these APIs or products. But of course, we first need to publish the developer portal to make it available. So let's go back to APIM and let's search for Portal Overview. That's a blade which can be found underneath the developer portal category. Let me open that. And here it says that the first step towards publishing is provisioning the developer portal. That hasn't been done yet, but that automatically happens when we click developer portal on top here. So let's do that. And there we go. We can now publish this site either by refreshing the portal overview page here and clicking publish, or by clicking publish site here on top. But seeing we're looking at the developer portal right now, in an edit view, we might as well have a look at what is possible. All of the developer portal, APIs, products, signing in, signing up, etc., the look and feel, the buttons, the CSS files, all of this can be edited via this built-in editor. You can find the pages here, you can add pages, you can add full layouts, you can define pop-ups, media, the full styles here, and so on. In other words, you can make sure that this looks exactly the way you want it to look, probably following the theme and colors and fonts used in your company. That is not something we're going to dive into in this course. Let me publish the site so we can have a look. In the background, our developer portal is now being published. Just to be sure I'm looking at this as a guest and not as an administrator, I'm going to copy this and open the developer portal again in incognito mode. Alright, I've opened an incognito window. Let me paste in the URI, and here we go. I am now looking at the developer portal as a guest, so as someone from an external company who is browsing the APIs we have exposed. Let's have a look at products. And as expected, we find the built-in Starter and Unlimited products, but also our Travel Inspiration Endpoints product, which we previously created. From here, users can subscribe to this product and they can have a look at the APIs that are in this product. By clicking an API, they get to the details of that API. They can get a hold of the API definition, they can see how they can send requests to it, and they can even see what is expected to be returned. In other words, this portal is very useful for people who want to learn how to integrate with your API and don't necessarily have access to your OpenAPI definition file. So this should give you an idea of what that developer portal is, but I'm not going to show more of this. This is not something that you run into a lot as an Azure developer that is creating APIs that are exposed here, unless you're working for a company that wants to expose or monetize APIs. From my experience, most don't, yet this portal was one of the 3 main components, so I did quickly want to show you this. We're going to dive into the last key concept now, policies.